You're carrying excess weight because something really hard happened to you. And let's not shame you for that. And let's actually hold you and empathize with you and love you through that, so that through this reflection that you're receiving from me or another human, you begin to see yourself. You begin to have self-compassion for yourself. And that's what really changes the pattern. Even when I was in treatment for bulimia and binge eating disorder, I knew it wasn't about the food, but I had no idea what was driving it. It felt like a hijack. That was all I wanted to do, and that was all I could do. It was like the only option. I didn't want to eat the food, but it was such an override. What is this thing? Where is this coming from? Nobody escapes childhood unscathed by trauma in whatever variety. We all have this opportunity of turning it into something of service, whether it's art or a creative expression. Like, we all have the opportunity of alchemizing it, turning shit into gold, turning pain into service.
This is the Human Future Podcast, where we explore the intersection of technology and spirituality with some of the world's brightest minds. Together, we paint a vision of the desirable future and discuss the actionable steps to make that vision a reality. And now, without further ado, let's begin. Welcome. Thank you, Jillian, for being here. Amazing human being you are. I was so excited to when I was putting down a list of at the beginning of launching a podcast, and I was like, who would I like to invite? And you're on that list.
Aww.
Yeah, I wanted to invite you from like day one, but
wow, that's special.
You just haven't been around. And so this is finally happening. So thank you for being here.
Wow, amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think a great place for us to start is by you sharing a little bit with viewers, whoever is listening. What do you do? What is that you bring into the world? What are your gifts?
Yeah, wow. Okay, so traditionally I'm a functional dietitian. I practice functional medicine, which is really like root cause medicine. But I have a bit of a different twist. I'm definitely unconventional. I focus predominantly on the psychology of eating. So what's driving our behavior around food? I believe that why and how we eat is arguably more important than what we're eating, even though that matters a lot. And all of these influences are driven so deeply by trauma and, adverse childhood experiences. And so I support the body, of course, support the physiology, but I focus on the why and the human and the heart and the psyche of the individual as well. And so I use various modalities, including psychedelics, to really access those deeply rooted wounds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, as, again, people might kind of wonder, why did you end up doing something like that? I'm sure there's a powerful story somewhere deep in there that brought you to doing this work.
Yeah, it was my story. I struggled with an eating disorder for the vast majority of my life, but had no idea why. I lacked a reference point of life prior to the development of that pattern. And so it just was the way that I coped every time there was any kind of trigger. It was so impulsively and compulsively, like reaching for food was really the only tool I had in my toolbox. And so I was frustrated because there was also a lot of like story and belief about my worth being wrapped up in my appearance. And so here I was like in this tug of war of like I had to look a certain way to get attention or love, yet the only tool I had was using food to numb. And so I suffered so long and so deeply. And even when I was in treatment for bulimia and binge eating disorder, I knew it wasn't about the food, but I had no idea what was driving it.
How did you know?
It felt like a hijack. It felt like it was in those moments, that was all I wanted to do, and that was all I could do. It was like the only option. And I didn't even want to be doing it. I didn't want to eat the food, but it was so like such an override. And so I was like, what is this thing? Where is this coming from? And I mean, that was when I was like 18, early 20s, that age range. But that thought never left me. And so I was just seeking, deeply seeking, many modalities, many forms of therapy, like all the things, until I heard a podcast that was like, it was a Tim Ferriss podcast talking about how a friend of his sat with, I think, Ayahuasca, who was struggling with a severe eating disorder and came out of that experience like healed. and in like full remission of the condition. And in everything in my body was like, this is my way out. And, life has it that wasn't my experience. It wasn't like I sat once and I was cured. Of course, this is my work. So life wanted me to like experience all of the realms and the depths and all the nooks and crannies of this particular path so that I could best serve. So that's really what it looked like. It was like that medicine ceremony opened so much for me, and I still had a lot of work to do to come out the other side.
And pursuing the functional medicine path, that was already going on when you heard about ayahuasca, or that was prior?
Yeah, coincidentally, it was kind of around the same time. I initially pursued nutrition because I was still deeply struggling with my body and food, and quite honestly wanted to like learn how to like hack the system so that I could be thin and happy, because that's what we're fed, right? That's the lie that we're told. And so I was pursuing it from that angle, but then I fell in love with the field. I loved biology. I loved biochemistry. I loved the science of it. And so and then around that time also, I was fortunate enough to meet a functional medicine doctor, because my body was so inflamed after a lifetime of abuse. I was diagnosed with a thyroid condition, and I had massive GI issues, and I was just really inflamed. And so another podcast revealed the world of functional medicine to me. And so I found a functional practitioner who started by asking me questions I had never been asked by a physician, such as, how was I birthed? Was I birthed vaginally? Was I breastfed? Was there trauma in my household? What was I being fed? Was there chaos? Like all of these questions that I was like, why is no one asking me this? Like, why have I never been asked this before? This is pertinent information. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, really, really fell in love with functional medicine. And like, that was the beginning. I think I was in Chem 1, like a prerequisite for my program. And I knew that the trajectory of my education was like now solidified in functional. So I was going to go academically, traditionally become an RD, sit for the board. But then immediately after, I pursued a functional route and got a lot of training in the world of functional medicine. And that really started to shift how I would practice as a dietitian, which I was really proud of, because this is actually like preventative and healing in the context of like chronic illness, which is what most of us are suffering with. Not like Western medicine, which is acute care emergency medicine, where nutrition, like you just can't do anything and your hands are tied. Mm-hmm. And so that felt exciting, but I always knew that there was an element of trauma. As I progressed in my education towards the end of the program, that's when I found medicine. And so I really started to understand that what's driving our behavior is trauma. And so how could I kind of merge these two knowings of like functional medicine is going to help heal the body, but we also have to focus on like what's driving behavior. Why is the body so inflamed, or what are the patterns that are perpetuating that status of inflammation? And it was trauma. And medicine is like, in my perspective, like the tool to access that.
For sure.
And so I merged them.
Beautiful. Yeah. Even like before we go into the depth of that, could you frame what is the biggest problem or challenge the modern medicine have? Like, where is it broken? I'm sure it's broken in a lot of different places, but can you identify some of them?
Yeah, inflammation is the root of all disease. Inflammation, and there's many things that cause inflammation. One of the antecedents, one of the foundational like predisposing factors in a person's life, honestly, is childhood trauma. Adverse childhood experiences creates dysregulation in the nervous system and creates this propensity for attempted regulation. And so how do we attempt to regulate? Food, substances, and scrolling, abusive relationships, like all of these factors play into how we try to find homeostasis in the nervous system. And it looks very different for many people, but food is like one of the most abused substances on the planet, which is why the obesity statistics are like astronomical. Same with, many weight-related conditions like cancer and diabetes and hypertension and all these things. And so inflammation is the root. And on a cellular level, it's like mitochondrial dysfunction. The body is not able to process and utilize the energy that it's being fed, or it's being fed to produce energy and kind of like a smooth running like system, because it's so bombarded and so deficient in like necessary nutrients and overwhelmed with toxins. And so it's really inflammation systemically. I would say that, that creates dysfunction in the body, and there are many ways to get there.
So the problem starts from the day of the birth, or it's prenatal, like what mother does with her health?
That's a great question.
How important is it for mother's health versus the first year of the baby being born?
It's a great question, and it's so important, the health of the mother. The health of the mother in terms of like environmental toxin exposure, but also the health of her gut, but also the health of her like mental and emotional status, like how regulated is her nervous system, because that's all like the environment in which the baby is being created and formed. And in my perspective, and it's not really just mine, but it's like the imprint on the baby, on the developing psyche and nervous system. Like there are studies, or there are studies that show how the baby's, the infant's nervous system from the age of like, in vitro to like 2 years old is synced up to that of the mother's. And so if the mother is dysregulated, the baby will be very dysregulated and kind of have that foundational like perspective on life, like deeply buried in the nervous system, that life is dangerous. And that evokes a lot of fear. And I believe this propensity to like always seek safety or comfort externally, because they don't know it yet. But we're biologically like wired to seek homeostasis, because no creature in nature can survive dysregulated. They have mechanisms to shake off the energy and kind of find homeostasis again. We don't. And so we're seeking that feeling of regulation constantly, unfortunately, outside of us.
Right. So basically, from what I'm hearing, the baby is born with a certain level of trauma already coming from the mother, and then some other trauma is being formed based on the environment, based on the upbringing, the way your relationship with the mother, how much attention you're getting from that environment. And then when you grow up, you not being aware of all of those reasons, you trying to subconsciously fill that hole or bring yourself back to balance by abusing different like things. You're just trying whatever works, kind of like that.
Yeah, I mean, where my mind wants to take this is like, let's pretend there are two babies, right? One was being created in a mother who was super regulated and really attuned and in a peaceful environment, which like sadly so many mothers are not, right? And so this baby is going to have a very different makeup psychologically, emotionally, on a nervous system level, like in a really every way, chemically, all of that, as opposed to a child who was maybe being created in the body of a mother who was in an abusive relationship, or was working 3 jobs, or was dealing with something like really chaotic. And then, after the birth, they're still in that environment. They're still being held by a mother whose maybe veins are coursing with cortisol or oxytocin. Like it really, it's like chemical, energetic. And when we're infants, we're sponges. And so if a mother is living, if her baseline is like stress and fear, we're being exposed to that as an infant, and that becomes our baseline. And so it's not even a conscious thing of like, trying to distract ourselves or trying to sabotage or whatever. It's this biologically driven urge to find homeostasis and balance. And if we're so away from that, we're constantly trying to find our way there, because that is like nature's equilibrium. That's how we're designed. And so if we're always off balance, the system is impaired. The system doesn't function optimally. And so we're always trying to find our way back there. We just do it in like self-destructive ways because we don't know better.
And the environment, so let's say living in a Western world where there are infinite amount of options and everything is available, doesn't help, right? Because then you're getting confused what your body needs, and you try, like, let's say growing up in Belarus, I, I have a feeling that people have less of those issues because there are less options to harm yourself. Like, it's almost like there are guardrails of what's allowed. There are also obviously externalities of that system of you're not being free. Your mind is not free. You're very constricted of what's possible, what you can do. But maybe there's a usefulness in defining some kind of like healthy thresholds of, say, don't sell this or that. I don't know. Like, is there maybe an advice or something that you would recommend for a government, for a society, to enforce certain ways of like how we distribute food, how we communicate about food, or something like that? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
and maybe enforcement is a strong word. Maybe it's like a recommendation or some kind of policy. I don't know.
Yeah,
something like that.
I'm really here to change the narrative around obesity and chronic illness and weight. My perspective is that it is attempted emotional regulation. It's that we're seeking that homeostasis. We're seeking self-soothing. It's not that people who are carrying excess weight are in any way like deficient or defective or have low willpower or no control or lazy or any of these stigmas. It's that they're carrying so much pain because of trauma. And so the way that I want to shift this is like, instead of enforcing anything or putting them on a rigid diet or giving them more education, it's actually guiding experiential opportunities for them to access pain and feeling and kind of come back in their body and begin to feel what's there. And this is really like my work, my messaging. People know what to eat. They know that if they're eating M&Ms for breakfast, that's not a good idea, as opposed to like a really beautiful nutrient-dense meal. It's not a lack of information. It's not restriction. It's not enforcement. It's like, let's talk about what's really there. Let's talk about what you're afraid to feel. And then let's help create safety in that person to begin to like dip their toe in the water of feeling, realizing that they're capable, that they're not going to be swallowed by it, that it's actually the thing that will free them. Because once there's safety in feeling a challenging emotion or sensation, then you no longer, and you're willing to feel it, you no longer need the food to numb it. The food loses its charge. It loses its impulse. And so that's what I do.
Right. So by bringing more awareness and consciousness into people, through people, they make decisions on what food to buy, what not to buy, and that influences the food producers, whether to make M&Ms or not. I'm also trying to understand other ways how we can address this systemically. Like, is there education and bringing people awareness around food or around health is probably the most effective way. I mean, that's why you're focusing on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, big food, big agri, big pharma, they have no desire for this narrative to get out. There's an agenda, obviously. And so I think it's like creating conversations or spaces for conversations that have a different perspective, especially from a dietitian. I'm not going to preach a diet. Yeah, sure, I'll teach you how to eat an anti-inflammatory diet and support the body, as I said, but let's talk about the why. Let's talk about how we're eating and why we're eating, and let's do it in community so that there's like safety in like sharing your story and sharing your experience. Like, one of my favorite energies is the energy of compassion, because it's like, yeah, you're carrying excess weight because something really hard happened to you. And let's not shame you for that. And let's actually like hold you and like empathize with you and love you through that, so that through this reflection that you're receiving from me or another human, you begin to see yourself. You begin to have self-compassion for yourself. And that's what really changes the pattern.
Yeah, it sounds like a more something that could help even more is having more communities of people coming together and sharing and be seen, and we just need more of that.
Yeah. And I always say there's so much medicine in sharing. You know this, you do this. It's like and for both parties, for the sharer, it's like being seen and like maybe sharing something that has been a secret for so long, like hearing and experiencing yourself speaking the words and the vibration of your voice. It's like a ripple effect. It's monumental. I have chills. Like, it's massive for the sharer. And then to receive that level of vulnerability and that courage as the recipient of that. And then also resonating with that and hearing your story come out of the voice of a brother or sister. It's like this crazy energetic space that gets created where so much healing is just like so available and profound.
Yeah. What do you think on, so I forgot the Brian Branson or something, the Don't Die guy? Do you know what I'm talking about? He basically puts millions of dollars into the scientific method of prolonging his life, finding all like the best current science that's available to measure every aspect of his body, basically, and optimize his diet, his exercise routine, and all of those things to prolong his life to the max. Like, basically his motto is "Don't die," basically live forever type thing. So it's very much mind-driven approach and like science-driven approach. And I'm sure there's usefulness in that. So I'm sure it is, to a certain degree, is functionally useful. So let's say if someone is very healthy based on measurements, and you're constantly tweaking, measuring, and scientifically, adjusting your health, but the person has not worked through their traumas, what would happen, you think?
I believe it will always intervene. Because what's at the root of the trauma is how the nervous system is impacted. And whenever there's dysregulation in the nervous system, there are cascades of hormones and neurotransmitters like cortisol and adrenaline that massively impact things like blood sugar levels. And when blood glucose levels are like really, really high and really low because there's all this stress and all this like tension and trigger, then that's going to influence inflammation. It's going to influence body weight. It's going to influence cognition. It's a merging of the two. It's like, if we think of the mind as kind of the masculine pole and the body and the emotions as the feminine pole, one can't dominate. That's still imbalance. So there has to be this like dynamic distribution and prioritization of both. Yeah, great for measurements and great for biohacking and all that kind of stuff. But if there's deeply rooted trauma, and it can manifest in different ways for different people. The manifestation that I see most of my clients, just because of the nature of my work, is overeating, emotional eating, and weight and illness. You don't necessarily have to have excess weight to be diagnosed with an autoimmune condition, but I believe it's deeply rooted in trauma. So it's like the physical manifestation of emotional pain is illness. It's imbalanced body from from all these sources I'm mentioning.
Right. Yeah, because the way I also understand is scientifically, it's probably most likely possible to make your physical vessel healthy. Your emotional body, the science has no tools and methods to affect your emotional body. And so I'm just wondering, like, if the science does everything possible to sustain your vessel in a healthy state, it's almost like we're creating this like zombie. We're prolonging the life, and the body is healthy, but the emotional you is either not present or unhealthy. I don't know how.
I believe we don't live in silos. Like, I don't believe the physical body is separate from the emotional body. They're one.
Yes.
And so what's happening in the physical body is a manifestation of what's happening emotionally, energetically. It just shows up in different ways. For example, like, you could have a thin woman, so it's not always weight related, right? You can have what we would perceive as like a thin, healthy woman, but she has fibroids or cysts in her, in the sacral chakra, right? In the womb space. And why is that? Why is there, autoimmunity or, development of this pathology showing up in the physical body when she's eating great and she's, journaling and she's taking all her supplements and she's doing all the things, but there's this manifestation of imbalance in the body. And so like, what do you point to? For me, it's energetic. For me, it's emotional.
And you're saying that type of imbalance, it's difficult to control with with supplements and other.
That's absolutely a strong pillar. Proper nutrition and anti-inflammatory diet, different nutrients, all, conventional, more Western medicine there's a time and a place for all. But I would definitely not leave out the energetic and the emotional.
Right. It sounds like the conventional approach is more like a temporary patch, just so that you have mind space to do the deeper work.
Yeah.
Because when you're in a physical pain, it's hard to do deeper work.
Right.
Because all you're focusing on is your pain.
Yeah. Support them foundationally, balanced diet, reverse nutrient deficiencies, make sure they're on certain supplements or if necessary medication, but have that, like the intent around the pharma route be short term. Let's not have it be lifelong. Like, it's a bridge. It can be a temporary support for sure, but then let's dive deeper into the root cause of like, why is this manifesting? Which, this is what I named my business, the root cause method. I believe the root cause of all disease is trauma. It's trauma and the various ways in which that's manifested in the body.
How would you, I am fairly logical myself, and I kind of play in both worlds. I'm putting myself in the shoes of someone super logical, and how would you walk them through logically, through like a sequence of steps for them to recognize that healing their emotional baggage and trauma is the only way to fix their issue? Like, what are some, if this and that, is there something like that you can mention, maybe walk someone through logically to give them enough evidence into their logical mind?
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, this is literally my work.
Okay.
So it's definitely emotion, like focusing on the emotions isn't the only way. So I have a program, for example, called The Garden. It's a 13-week program for both men and women. And in the beginning of the program, I'm analyzing data. So I'm either analyzing blood chemistry or stool or dried urine, depending on what the focal point is for that individual. So I'm looking at data provided by the body to tell me and help me identify where there's imbalance. And then from there, I design a protocol specifically for that individual based on like what we're focusing on. And so that is where we start. We start with supporting the physiology, but then I take them on a process of like diving deep into the emotion and the energy. And so that's when I use psychedelics on weeks 5, 7, and 9 of this 13-week program to explore on a subconscious level the genesis of these patterns. So I have a client who's coming to mind. At the end of the program, she ended up losing 44 pounds. It wasn't because I put her on a rigid diet. It wasn't because I was like, eat this, don't eat this, take your supplements, like measure everything, be perfect, weigh yourself every day. Like, no. It was because we explored so deeply what was causing her to use food to self-soothe. What was behind, or what was perpetuating this relationship with food that had her gain that 44 pounds and be inflamed and have ramifications because of the inflammation in her body, because of the weight, because of this pattern. And so I don't know if I'm answering your question, but it's kind of this sequence of like, yes, data, yes, logic, yes, science, evidence-based, yes.
Right.
And the missing component is the relationship with food, how we're using food, why we're using food, but also honestly, what I'm really doing is I'm really reconnecting people to themselves. I'm dissolving the wedge that keeps people numb, which is food. When someone uses food in a soothing way to attempt to regulate their emotional state or their nervous system, to distract themselves from something uncomfortable, a sensation, a thought, a memory, whatever, they are putting a gap. They're putting a wedge in between themselves and their body. They're dissociating. They're leaving their body. And that's what I'm here to dissolve. That's what I'm really here to bring a person back in so that they can have the courage to feel and know how to hold themselves through something uncomfortable, where they no longer need the food to distract themselves. And that's where the weight loss happens. And that's where the remission of chronic illness happens, in the learning how to regulate their own emotional landscape. And that, yeah, it's the most epic thing. And so, yes, it's all the science, but it's also this really intuitive, feminine, energetic, emotional stuff that is missing from the conversation, that is equally important, equally, not more, not less, but like both are necessary.
Sure, yeah. And often when people come to you, do they come to you for what reason? Because they know that you're a great dietitian, that you can help them with prescribing supplements and know, like, doing the science part, or the other, or it's a like, what are the main reasons why you have people find
Both.
you? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really great at that side, and I'm really great at the other side. And I think, honestly, I attribute this to my journey. Like, I don't have a PhD, but I basically got a PhD in the world of this because I have been struggling with it since I was 3 years old. Like, it's been my path of discovery through my own process. But as we were talking about before we started this conversation, like, I had to learn through my own journey so deeply and intensely so that I could draw from the wisdom I gained from my path to serve others. And that's just been the biggest blessing, but also what I believe creates resonance and trust in the people that find me, because they know I know this world. They feel it in my energy. They know I've walked this path. And from that, I draw upon all of those experiences to serve all of them.
Yeah, beautiful. Would you say a lot of people who haven't started addressing their health disorders are unaware of them using food for numbing?
Yeah.
A lot of that. What are some questions would you give them to tickle, like, that part of them to start questioning, oh, maybe that's me?
Yeah, so good. So do you ever eat when you're not hungry? Do you have trouble pushing the plate away when you're comfortably satisfied, or do you feel this compulsion to keep eating when something is in front of you? Do you feel uncomfortably full after a meal? Do you enter into a space of like shame and self-loathing and frustration after you've overeaten? Right? Like, yeah, do you even taste the food? Or do you eat so fast and so automatically that you're not even present? You're all of a sudden your plate is empty and you're like, where did that food go? These are all like expressions of emotional eating. And here's the interesting thing, like, many people think I'm referring to eating disorders. I actually don't work with people who have acute disorders, who are anorexic or continually engaging in like bulimia nervosa. It's really like disordered eating. It's a dysfunctional relationship with food, which quite frankly are the masses. It's everyone who's carrying excess weight, aside from like a few medical outliers who have certain conditions, but it's the vast majority of people carrying excess weight are engaging in these patterns, and they aren't diagnosed with eating disorders. They haven't been prescribed or diagnosed or sent to treatment or anything like that. It's just how they dance with food. It's them. It's those people who feel frustrated with themselves and can try to follow a diet and then they fail because diets don't work. Diets are not addressing the reasons we're reaching for food in this way. And yeah, it's those people.
And so once people like hear those questions and say, yes, okay, that's me. What are some steps would you recommend they take, the actionable first immediate things that they could do?
What's coming through is like journal, like reflect, go into an introspective space with yourself and like maybe just process this, that this might be you. You might have a dysfunctional relationship with food, and maybe explore what that's looked like. Like, wow, this thing has plagued me like for so many years of my life. And what is it costing you? Is it costing you relationships? Is it costing you experiences in your life? Like maybe you don't travel, or maybe you don't, ride a roller coaster or sit on an airplane or have sex or do the things that you desire to do because you feel self-conscious or shameful, or what is it costing you? For me, I lived in deep isolation for the vast majority of my life because I was embarrassed by the way that I looked. A, and B, I didn't know how to connect with people. I didn't know how to be. I was always trying, even when we first met, I didn't know who I was because I had not been living in my body for so long. I did not know myself. And so I couldn't feel comfortable being around other people. I was always trying to be who I thought they wanted me to be and morphing, and nobody could connect with me from that space. And so it was reinforcing this sense of like, I'm weird. I should be alone. No one likes me. It was terrible. So it's like, what is this relationship with food costing you? And then the other prompt would be like, what do you even want? What do you want? If this thing wasn't there, what would your life be like? What would freedom feel like in your body? And then maybe that sparks this like hunger, no pun intended, but this real deep hunger and desire for like a different experience of life. Yeah. And then find me.
Yeah, find you. I mean, that would be the most effective, probably fast track way. Yeah, journaling is a good practice. What other maybe actionable things like food awareness, what they eat, is that important?
It's very important. I feel compassion for people because there are so many perspectives around in the world of nutrition. Everybody eats, so everybody thinks they know best about nutrition. It's one of those fields. But also like, these huge organizations and entities like Big Food and Big Pharma, they have agendas. They're very capital driven. And so they create confusion intentionally. So keto is now the best thing, and paleo is now the best thing, and intermittent fasting is now the best thing. And in my opinion, there's really no one size fits all in medicine. Intermittent fasting can be detrimental to some people with super dysregulated nervous systems or thyroid conditions or adrenal issues, whereas for another person, it might be the best thing in the world. And so it's like real food, real as unprocessed as it can be, high quality food. But then I would also say like maybe find a somatic practitioner, somatic experiencing, like bring yourself, help yourself, or recruit help to get back in your body so that you can process what it feels like to have an impulse around food. You can process whatever you're trying to push down with food. You can be supported in the accessing of it so you're no longer using food to push it down and thus gaining the weight.
So when you spoke about science and kind of like Eastern, or like how would you call those two polarities of two approaches? One is scientific, the other one
energetic and emotional.
So starting with one or the other, is there a better practice? Like one starting with the more emotional, fixing your emotional is the faster track than fixing your physical, or doing it both maybe at the same time is the most effective one?
I would say wherever you want to start, just start.
Yeah.
Like just get on the path. Whatever feels resonant. If a lot of people start with like the practical, like the food, and then they think because it's seductive, like I'm just going to follow this thing and this thing is going to work. But like the next time they get triggered, they're now derailed. And so I think both are critical. Starting the practical while you're beginning to explore certain modalities of therapy, or you find a ketamine clinic where you can utilize a psychedelic medicine to start to tap into some of these root causes and trauma-based influences, or however you start, whatever your journey looks like is perfect.
Yeah.
Just don't get stuck in the practical. Don't think that's going to work, because it's not. It's just not. Yeah. Diet is what I mean. Yeah. Diets don't work. Diets are inherently temporary and finite. But changing the way that you eat, changing your relationship with food, now that's foundational, that's sustainable. But that is complementary to, addressing the underlying stuff.
Another, for me to understand, so there are hypothetically, two humans eating the exact same thing. One is processed all of the traumas, the other one haven't. The way they digest and the way they process the food is going to be very different, right?
It's going to be very different.
Very different.
Yeah. When we're in a state of stress, in a sympathetic state, from a nervous system perspective, we are flooded with cortisol and adrenaline, and so these stress hormones have a huge impact on blood sugar levels, like I was saying, on cognition and what parts of the brain are activated or deactivated. But also, when the body is in that level of stress, it doesn't prioritize digestion. It prioritizes survival always. And so blood and energy is not sent to the GI tract. It's sent to the extremities so that we can run away from a saber-toothed tiger, for example, to survive. And so there's maldigestion and malabsorption and issues with assimilation and maybe stagnation in motility. All of these symptoms are because of stress. And so if a person is regulated and they're not distracted while they're eating and they're chewing and they're enjoying their food and they're present with their food, maybe they're even blessing their food, it's very different in every way, the effects on the body.
What kind of lifestyle in relationship to food would you promote? Like, paint to me a desirable day in the life of someone. What does that look like? Maybe in relationship to their food, to relationship to their environment, community, their family. What does that look like?
Like an ideal. Yeah, I would say a really beautiful night's sleep. So whatever you're doing the night before that allows that. So like no blue light and maybe not a heavy meal or a lot of sugar before bed. Maybe you're reading or spending time with a loved one, whatever. Going to bed early, maybe 10 p.m., like getting a solid 7.5, 8 hours of sleep, and then waking up not with an alarm clock, maybe waking up with the sun, getting sunlight in your eyes right away, getting something warm and soothing, maybe like a glass of room temperature warm water with some lemon and a pinch of sea salt. So you get those minerals first thing in the morning because you've been dehydrated all night. And then slowness, spending time maybe in self-reflection in the morning and journaling, contemplation, sunlight, as I said, and maybe some movement, a little bit of like light stretching, some breath, meditation practice in the morning it's beautiful, whether it's 10 minutes or an hour, just making time to connect with the sacred, first thing. And then some people have different perspectives on this. Some people, it depends on also like the lifestyle and the flow of the person. If it's advised to get protein first thing in the morning, just to interrupt a process called catabolism, like where the body starts to utilize amino acids for fuel once the glucose has been utilized. So interrupting that process by a protein-rich meal is really nourishing. Typically warm food in the morning, not a lot of sweets, not a lot of refined carbohydrates. And then if you're wanting coffee, having it with a meal or after a 90-minute period in the morning, so you're not like blasting your system with caffeine, adrenaline, cortisol. Just helps to regulate the nervous system and stay like centered and grounded. And then, that would be a really beautiful morning. Slowness, nature, sun, nourishment in all the ways. Nourishment is one of my favorite words because it doesn't just mean from food. It's like nourishing the self, spending time with the self and loving on the self. And then, exercise. So resistance training, strength training, or movement, swimming, whatever your flow is. And then, of course, as you mentioned, like relationships, loving on people and being loved on by people and people you want to be around. And also like the work that lights you up. Because if you're doing all the things that are so beautiful for yourself, but then you're going into a corporate scene in a cubicle and you hate your job and you hate your life, like it's not going to offset that. Your routine is not going to offset that. So one of the things I always say to my clients, which I just love, is like, life is so loving and benevolent that it makes it really uncomfortable to live in misalignment. when we stray from alignment, that's where we suffer, because life wants us to find our way back into alignment. Life doesn't want you to be able to sustain misalignment. So that's why we suffer, so that you can find your way back into like, oh, what feels good? What lights me up? What it feels like flow.
Do you have any ideas for someone who is maybe technologically sophisticated and would like to build a tool for, up-leveling the humanity in the very positive, constructive way? In the line of work that you're doing, are there any areas that you see an opportunity to create some kind of product or service that it's not out there, maybe?
What just came to my mind is like, so my work is deeply experiential. I talk about concepts and I'm educating from a nutrition or physiological perspective, but I bring people into experiences in my work. And so, yeah, something, I just had this cool vision actually, where, so I use ketamine in my work. Ketamine is a FDA-approved psychedelic. I don't prescribe it. I'm a dietitian, but I work with prescribers and I hold space. And so when someone is in an experience like that, what I'm doing is minimally guiding an experience. So by this point, when they begin to sit with the medicine, we've worked together for over a month. And so I know them, I know their story, I know the nuances of their patterning. And so when they're in an altered state of consciousness, I'm able to very lovingly and gently lead them into certain realms of their story. And this is really transformational, because if fear presents itself, I can help them use it. I can help them open to it instead of contracting. And then they get to have this expansion on the other side of it, which is really beautiful. So there was a technology somehow. I mean, it's hard to replace the humanness, but something that could guide people sequentially or systematically.
Verbally? Is that how you do it typically?
Yeah,
Through
it's
voice?
verbal. Because it's virtual, my work.
Right.
And so if they,
it's virtual.
it's all virtual. Right. And so they're at home, comfortable, like similar to at-home ketamine company model. So they're in their space and I'm on a screen, but very energetically attuned and holding the container and present. And so if there was like, everybody's story and psychedelic experience is very different, but maybe if there was a recording, this wouldn't be that hard to do. Maybe I'm giving someone a great idea that I should do.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
But, more healing, the better. So if there was like, a process that could be guided, that could take people through an experience to help them access something. So it was general enough that many people could benefit from it, but still people could kind of attach their own process to it. During this altered state of consciousness, it could be massive.
As you were sharing it, this idea came, I'm sure you've interacted with OpenAI or ChatGPT, being fairly, sophisticated, or like as sophisticated as an average human would be. We get to the point where it's as sophisticated as like the most sophisticated human that will know all about, let's say, you're feeding all of the information, you're sharing your notes, you're sharing your thoughts, your past experiences, and you're putting it into your collection of memories that's only being accessed by this AI. It's not public. Let's say it's very secure and private, and you have this personal AI agent that can guide you through your experience. So verbally and maybe even visually too. I don't know, like you're going into some kind of experience and it could sense, maybe you can measure how, like you can know a little bit more about you by measuring some
Oh my God. As you were talking, I just like, what if there was even like this bot could take you back to like memories?
Yes.
And like there were like images and pictures, family pictures like uploaded or fed to this AI, and then you were brought to like a memory, a core memory. Yeah. And like help you go back. I mean, it could be very confronting. So there would need to be a lot of support for the individual, because you don't want to cause re-traumatization. but maybe the bot could be programmed to like avoid like real charge, or like it not take you to a moment, but just like lead you to something and let you explore that. Wow, that would be incredible.
Right. Yeah. If it can like dynamically measure your state and say like, oh, is this enough, or like, is this too much, maybe, and then go into that direction and show you more about.
Yeah, because if you were regulated and felt safe, which is like the core ingredient to explore something, then like you could track that with just vitals, like how accelerated is your heart rate. Like if you're approaching something scary, but you're not activated, your heart rate will be within normal range, right? And so it could measure like with a sensor or something like that, how activated you were, or if you felt safe enough to explore something. Really,
I love that.
That's amazing.
Cool.
We should do this.
We should do this.
I
mean, even starting with as simple as the verbal input and having prior, as you mentioned, prior to sessions, you know a lot about them already. So inputting that as like creating a framework of what is enough, what's needed to provide the most amount of help during the process.
Yeah, I think I'm going to do this.
Cool. I love that.
I think I'm going to create this.
At least, start experimenting and maybe collecting your information. Like, I don't know, do you record for your own sake, your own sessions?
No, just because of HIPAA, like there's regulations and stuff. But you know, if they choose to record our conversation, I always allow it. Nobody's ever asked to record a medicine experience, but after my call, we go immediately into integration. So we're processing, especially while their brain is still in a state of neuroplasticity. And oftentimes people request to record that, which is, it's theirs. So I always allow. Yeah,
because that would be very useful data to like train the AI on. Like,
that's a fun question. My wheels are turning. I think I'm going to go create this.
Oh, yeah. Let's see, the future of medicine. What does that look like for you? A desirable future of medicine?
Yeah, it's a combination of the hard science and the heart. I think it's technology that helps like heart rate variability. I think it's healing in community. I think it's more plant medicine. I think it's beautiful communal integration processes, and I think it's biohacking. You know, I don't know if this is the space or not, but I'll share an element of my story. Which I mentioned, like I struggled with food since the age of 3 years old. I was obsessed with candy and treats and sweets because there was an abundance at my disposal when I was a child. And as this developed, it became a full-blown eating disorder in my teens and 20s. And as I said, I had no idea why it existed. And so there was like all this shame with myself of like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I not eat? Like, I don't want to be doing this. If I don't change my relationship with food or stop this pattern, I'm never going to heal my gut or my thyroid as it progressed. And why I'm such an advocate for plant medicine is that when I was in my early 30s, I sat for the first time with ayahuasca, and I learned that I was molested between the ages of 3 and 5 years old. And so in that experience, I was like overwhelmed with compassion for myself and this like deep seeing of myself and this pattern. It was just like, no wonder I have been using food all my life to try to numb. No wonder I couldn't be in my body and be around other people and feel safe in the world or in my body or around humans. And so it just illuminated so many things for me. And I know there are people that have a similar story or other things that have happened that has been suppressed from their memory. I had no recollection for 30 years. None, no suspicion, no recollection. I just knew I felt deeply unsafe and I didn't know why. And there are so many people walking around using food in this way, blaming themselves and shaming themselves and bashing themselves for this dysfunctional relationship with food and punishing their bodies with rigid diets or over-exercise or punishing themselves by isolating and living in prison. And they don't even know why. they don't know that something horrible happened and that this pattern is just a byproduct of that. And so while it can be scary to confront these memories, if you're safe and held in a beautiful container or with a person that's trusted, or you little by little start to explore and get curious, like you may find something like this in your psyche, in your subconscious, that also totally illuminates yourself to yourself. You get to see yourself for the first time. You get to see the genesis of these patterns and the why behind all the things. And the knowing of that story began the process of freeing myself from it. I needed to know what happened, not all the details, not the movie, not the story, even though I saw many, many things. I needed to understand why and know why so that I could begin to heal. We can't heal anything we're unaware of. And so psychedelics brings us into the subconscious mind. It brings us into those memories and those pain points, often in a very gentle way. I was not re-traumatized when I learned this story. I was not reliving the events. It was bizarre and abstract and confronting and deeply uncomfortable, but it wasn't re-traumatizing. And I'm so grateful for these medicines because they helped me find the path of liberating myself. And it's accessible to everyone else. It's just so accessible. So, yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah. You said it wasn't traumatizing. Is it because you've already done some work? Because I'm sure some people might be really terrified of finding out something like that and not being able to hold it.
No, I was totally unsupported. I was in a marriage that was misaligned. Basically, we were strangers and just roommates and kind of cohabitating. I didn't have any friends. I didn't have a therapist or any support. And it's the benevolence of the medicine. It's the loving, unconditionally loving nature of the medicine and the high intelligence of the medicine, because had I been re-traumatized, I would have completely shut down and I would have never been able to continue to explore this path. But it was like bizarre and uncomfortable, but I was being shown, I was seeing. And yeah, it wasn't overwhelmingly challenging. It was just enough that I was like receiving this information and like, what the hell? Yeah. But also like, okay, this is wild. I had no reason for thinking this, but it's making a lot of sense. And everything else that now in retrospect, like I could totally see the string of events and why I have been the way I've been and all the things. But it was just enough safety and comfort to give me the curiosity and the confidence in the medicine to keep exploring. And then I did, and I began to work deeply with the medicine after that to excavate and to extrapolate the energy from my system and heal and free myself and absolutely transform. And we were saying, like, I'm not the same human. I am not in any way. And in all the ways, she's still there. And I really honor and have deep reverence for all the versions of me who led me to the me now. But I've lived a different experience of life in one lifetime.
Yeah, you're beautiful and shining. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for, as we were also speaking outside of this, you're also not only doing this work for you, you're doing it for the collective, and you're doing it for the your whole ancestral lineage as well. Maybe share a little bit about that experience where you saw the whole lineage kind of like...
Yeah, everyone, when there's, how do I say this? When there's a wound like that present, it impacts everyone in the family in energetically and in some capacity. And so the work that we do on ourselves has this profound ripple effect on people that came before us and people that will come after. And so to take this process, this healing of this experience so seriously, it's healing and freeing, liberating many people in my line, many people in my community, many people I don't even know in the collective, as you said. we're all connected. So the work that we do on ourselves just has a massive ripple effect.
Yeah, beautiful. For those who are called to support you, what are some different ways? Obviously, working directly with you is one beautiful way of supporting you. Any other ways how people can support you in your mission?
I've been public speaking lately. So I've been speaking at both psychedelic conferences and medical conferences, sharing about my work and my story. And so I'm excited for more opportunities of speaking. Even doesn't necessarily have to be at conferences, although I like that. And it can also be like things that you create, like where community comes together and we're sharing our stories. And I love leading conversation. I love facilitating conversation where I'm not the only one speaking and sharing, but I'm encouraging everyone else to do that. And sometimes I may give a reflection that ends up being valuable for everybody in the space when someone is sharing. So reflecting to their share. And so, yeah, just starting conversations or being invited to participate in conversations or facilitate conversations is really beautiful. And also I'm getting into live facilitation. So I'm co-facilitating a retreat outside of Austin in July. I may be co-facilitating in December. And so, yeah, my work is very, our relationship with food central. I also talk a lot about the mother wound. So a relationship with our mother and how that impacts our relationship with food, because I really feel that people who struggle with food are hungry for nurturance. And that's what they're seeking through food, that feeling of nurturance and comfort. Because there was an absence of that in childhood. A lot of like sensuality with food and embodiment and all of these kind of different modalities, plus the evidence-based science stuff and the energetics and the spirituality and all. So I kind of bring a lot of things and meld them into my offering. And I'm really in the space of like desiring to collaborate with other humans. Where we each kind of, all the facilitators bring their own gift and then we serve in a really like well-rounded, freaking powerful, potent way. And so, yeah, I would love to be invited into those spaces. I'm feeling ready for that, which is cool.
Yeah. I see a lot of big things coming for you. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm not only saying it because you're a good friend, but I really do feel something, and I know that you know it too.
Yeah.
You feel it too.
Yes, thank you.
You're right in front of this massive, big thing that you're about to embark on. Yeah, you're already right on it, in the early stages of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so crazy. You're reminding me of something. I remember being 18 years old, fighting with my mother, standing like leaning against the door frame of this hallway in our house and being so deep in bulimia. And as I'm arguing with her, I hear this voice that's like, one day you're going to use this pain to serve a lot of people. And I was like, what the hell was that? And I wasn't conscious enough to like do anything with it or think anything of it, but I have never forgotten that. And it feels as if that is absolutely manifesting. And I'm here for it because when we go through, I think all of us, nobody escapes childhood unscathed by trauma in whatever variety, right? And we all have this opportunity of turning it into something of service, whether it's art or a creative expression or a service or whatever, policy creation. Like we all have the opportunity of alchemizing it, turning shit into gold, turning pain into service. And I feel so fortunate that I'm able to do that. It makes my suffering worth so much more. And it lights me up. It just fills my heart.
Yeah. So how can people find you? Any other last notes that you would like to share before we wrap up this beautiful conversation?
Your relationship with food, body weight, has very little to do with food and everything to do with how willing you are to feel. If you're willing to feel, if you're able to create safety within yourself to feel, you no longer need food or other substances to numb, to push them down. And that that is a message I really, really hope people internalize. And compassion is the doorway to creating safety within yourself to feel. We can't shame our way into a healthy body. We can't ridicule our way into self-love. It doesn't work. I've tried it. It does not work. And so it's self-compassion and softness and gentleness. And it's such a fruitful journey. So I would really love people to receive that. And my website is therootcausemethod.com. On Instagram, you can find me at Jillian Acosta _RD. Stands for registered dietitian. And that's where I'm most active. And yeah, if something resonated and you just want to share that with me, I would love to receive the message. If you're curious about working with me, I'm here for that. There's a program that I'm launching, or that I've launched. I'm running one right now. I will be launching another one soon. It's called Wildflower. And the tagline for that is find the beauty in the weeds. And it's all about taking our relationship with food that has caused a lot of frustration and cost us so much, and finding the beauty in it, using it to free ourselves from it. This relationship with food helps us identify what needs actually want to be met, what we're trying not to feel. And that is such valuable information. So we can use this relationship with food as the breadcrumbs to finding those things and learning how to meet those needs ourselves in ways that actually nourish us and empower us and embody us. And so, yeah, it's alchemical. And it's a group program for women who are on this path. And we talked about the medicine of community and group and sharing. And it's incredibly powerful and potent. And so I'll be launching another cohort really soon. And so, yeah, those are my two primary offerings, the garden and Wildflower.
Thank you, Jillian, again for being here. Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me. You're so special.
Conversation. Really enjoyed it myself. Hopefully those who are still around listening to us, you've enjoyed this conversation as well.
Thank you so much.